Here's the rest of the clip. So now I'm going to discuss the other two articles that you don't really have access to, but they really do a good job at summarizing these wicked problems and how the concept has developed over time in the past few decades. So this first article here was an editorial in Landscape and Urban Planning written in 2013, so it is quite recent. And it talks about how overall the AAA approach of past decades to wicked problems, which is the awareness, acceptance, and adaptation of these problems, should move towards an APT strategy of adaptive, participatory, and transdisciplinary solutions. So instead of just recognizing the problems, how can we actually come to solutions? So again, in just reassessing what wicked problems are, as opposed to tame problems that had linear protocols with conventional approaches that we could divide and conquer these issues, wicked problems are intractable and ubiquitous. They're everywhere. We have to recognize them, and we can't just divide and conquer. So more recent things that have had these include stem cell research, terrorism, urbanization, sustainability, and resource management are all issues that come up again and again where there's not just one way to deal with these issues. Just overall, it's found in the term is found wicked problems in articles assessing public administration, policy analysis, healthcare, education, ecology, deforestation, and overall, these are mainly in Western nations of English speakers, is where these articles are found. To summarize the 10 characteristics of wicked problems of the previous article, this article just draws them as five that really fit in the 10 categories quite well. First is the indeterminacy of problem formation. So there's no definite way to form the problem, and that's based off the wording, and it's because of who's interested, whose values are we using. We also talk about the irreversible consequentiality. So once we do something, there's going to have effects again and again. And there's also a non-definitiveness of problem or solution, and because this problem will come on again and again, we don't really know where it starts or when it will end. Finally, it's non-solubility. There's really no way to ultimately solve this problem. We can only suppress it or overcome it, but we cannot eliminate it. And finally, each is individually unique. And that's, again, the example I was using before of that traffic in LA is not the same as traffic in New York. So this article argues for, instead of just being aware, but to actually deal with these problems in an adaptive, participatory, and transdisciplinary manner. And that way we need to look at the problem holistically and work with it through, look at it as a process as opposed to a problem, and see how we can approach it in that manner. So similarly with this, we use a panoramic social lens. We look as far as we can, as wide as we can, rather than the scientific method, which really breaks down problems into little pieces as possible. And just as a solution, this article suggests that collaboration, an effort to reduce conflicts between the various interests involved, as well as building trust amongst the stakeholders would be the most optimal way to solve these wicked problems. I want to take a moment to address some of the bigger picture items that this article draws out that really weren't discussed in the previous one. And again, this is because that this is 30 years after the first one was created. And we have to kind of question, is this really asking us to give up the idea of the Enlightenment picture of problem solving? And this is the idea generated in the 1700s when the sciences really became big. If we can solve all of our problems through science and the scientific method, hypothesis generation, observations, testing, data collection, proposed solutions, deciding between conclusions, that whole process that you learn in high school, where you reduce problems to simple issues that we want to solve. We use deductive or inductive reasoning to free us from the problems of the world around us. We don't know what compounds are made of. We don't know why things are burning. We come up with a theory and then we work from there. Unfortunately, it appears that, as stated in this article, that the beast is still wicked as ever. These wicked problems, using this old Enlightenment philosophy, were not going away. They're still there. They seem to be shifting form. Almost a concept of a conservation of wickedness. How there's a conservation of energy, where things are neither created nor destroyed, they just change form, is as we try to solve one problem one way, we get another problem. Does this really mean we need to totally get rid of our vision of problem solving? And if that's so, does this APT version where we adapt and we are more participatory and transdisciplinary, where we allow in more input from various partners, does this help us solve it as opposed to this old Enlightenment method? And if so, though, how do we put this better knowledge into action? How do we actually get all these groups together all these different forms of scientists and community leaders to actually sit down at the table and come up with constructive solutions and actually implement them. And then does this ultimately mean that we are going to reject scientific solutions altogether? Is there nothing we can learn from the scientific method or the scientific processes? Is it just that we are relying on this new kind of fuzzy APT way of sciences? So again, this we really have to question of how much do we keep from the past and how much do we think of as a new way of problem solving to deal with these wicked issues? And does this mean we have to change the way we think about science, where formulate a problem and come up with a solution? And if not, then what do we use the sciences for? How far can we use that process into solving modern problems? It just gives you something bigger to think about, and these are questions that humanity has been dealing with since the 1700s. So again, this was a really short article, or just short, briefly, just saying how the idea of wickedness has not left the idea of planning. There's a new way that we went over. We can characterize problems into 5 categories, as well as instead of just viewing problems, we should seek to correct them.